brand new thing. Gotta go places and do things. Maybe to forget
So what you're looking at right here is what I would call dog vision, like we put on some dog vision goggles. The colors look a little bit odd. Dogs can see a mixture of blue and yellow and some gray, but they can't actually see red. So the next time you grab like a red ball and you throw it into some long grass and they can't find it, if they do find it, chances are it's because they're using smell. You know, that's what they use. That's their alternative method to figure out how to find the ball that you threw in the grass. When I say the word accessibility, what comes to mind? Maybe a handicapped parking spot or an elevator or a special ramp that people can go up so that they can not have to take the stairs. It's everywhere in our daily life. We all see it. We don't really pay much attention to it because most of us are blessed enough to not really have to consider, you know, dealing with those things, just living our daily life. Now, those things that I mentioned previously were more of like transportation, just getting from A to B, just, you know, physical mobility. But what about using software applications? So let me throw some statistics at you to kind of put this into perspective. 1 in 12 men have some form of color blindness, and 1 in 200 women have some form of color blindness. And now, when I say colorblind, it doesn't mean that it's like black and white, like old school movies and old school television. There's 3 main types of color blindness. I won't go over all of them here. But if we go back to the dog cam for a second, you can see that the dog can't see red at all. They can just see blue and yellow and some shades of gray. And there's cones in your eye that affect what colors you can see. So someone might be able to see the color orange, but if the color orange starts to fade too light, then they can't see the color orange anymore. And it's unfortunate because there's not a lot of applications out there designed with this in mind. The only application that I can remember off the top of my head right now was a Battlefield game. So you could go into the options and you could change the color blindness mode, and the icons on your mini-map and your HUD would change so that you could see the icons. An example would be if you go into a doctor's office and you're trying to fill out a form, but you can't read the form because the background of the form is light gray and the text is slightly darker but still light gray. To someone who's colorblind, that just looks like one gray wall with nothing on there, and they're probably just looking at it like, what is this? I can't see this. So there's things like that you have to keep in mind. And to fix that, you would need to adjust the contrast, and we'll go over all of the fixes, or the main fixes, in this video. That's just one of the accessibility issues that people should have in mind when they're designing web application software. Another example would be vision impairment. So not color blindness. You can see all the colors but can't really see, right? You're legally blind, and to fix that, there would maybe be some sort of screen reading software or a way to enable a lot larger text, but there's some considerations with that because text can kind of overlay when you start to increase the size of things. There's also motor skill impairment, when you have limited use of your hands and arms, and you should consider how they could navigate that. If they can only use maybe one finger on their hand, how could they navigate through the page? Well, there's something called tab targeting. There's a lot of fixes out there, a lot of interesting fixes. Not only should you care about accessible software because it allows those people that have a difficult time to use it, it can also benefit your job hunt. And that's what we're going to talk about really in this video.
Freedom for me is waking up in the morning and going to sleep at night, and in between doing exactly what I want to do. What's the secret to happiness? The secret to happiness is finding something you love and then doing that for the rest of your life.
I'm calling it 15-minute resume skills. As clickbait as that sounds, I really believe that you can learn a lot of accessibility in about 15 minutes. Will the video actually be 15 minutes? I'm not sure, but that's going to be the title. Making a website that passes an accessibility audit and just is completely, fully accessible is a daunting task. That is really difficult to do. However, to get a website mostly accessible for, let's say, 80% of the way, it's actually not that hard to do, and it takes about 15 minutes. So item number 1, good page titles are so important for people navigating the tabs that they have open and navigating the page and knowing where they're at, like their orientation when they start looking through the page. So the first thing screen readers say when a user opens a web page is the page title. So if you can't see the page, screen reader's gonna read the page title, you're gonna know if you're on the right page or not. These are some other things kind of related to title and text for screen readers. When you have an image, if you look on the HTML element, there's an attribute for alt, and that means alternative text. Typically it's used for if the image doesn't load for whatever reason, then some text of whatever that image would display, but it's also used for screen readers. So if someone can't see the actual image and they know that there's a section that they hit and okay, oh, this is an image and this is what the image is, so they can kind of know where they're at. Another thing that you should look for is heading. Every page should have at least one heading. Like the size of the font or the boldness of the font looks like it should be a heading, then it should be tagged as a heading. It should be an H1 tag in HTML. Those are things that you can do real quick just so that a screen reader can help someone navigate through their page. So let's talk more about the color blindness that I was mentioning before. There's a thing called luminance contrast ratio. I know that's a big fancy word, but it just means that there's not enough difference between the colors for people to be able to read it. So classic example that I'm sure you guys have probably seen when you go to the eye doctor is this, it's called Izahara color test. So I'll put it on the screen, right? Most of you guys can see this, and you can see that there is the number 29 here. So I'll put a second image on the screen now. But what you should be able to see is a number 3. If you can't see a number 3, you might be colorblind. I'm just kidding. There's actually not a number 3 specifically designed in there. There's no number at all. But this is what a page looks like to somebody who has color blindness. Not enough difference between the different shades of color there for you to be able to see what's there. So I'll give you some real examples again of what it looks like on a web page. We have a light background with light text, and to fix this, it should be a little bit more pronounced. So you have a light background with really dark text. You could also consider adding an accessibility toggle on your page. So you just click a little toggle button and it toggles it on and off for people who can't read. So it would make the background like really dark black and the text like yellow. It would look terrible, right? But you're just trying to be able to use the software. And there's other colors you could use to get that same contrast ratio, but that's what it boils down to. So you can think about that just having the entire app friendly to color contrast with people that have color blindness, or you could have a little toggle. So let me get super specific here. You need a contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1 for normal size text, and you're like, I have no idea how to check the contrast ratio. Well, luckily there's a tool from webaim.org/resources/contrast checker. Put the link down as a comment, I'll pin it. You can just use the little slider and you can put the different hex codes for the different colors, and you can check to see if the contrast is enough for most color blindnesses. And the little things you see on the side are for audits, and so you can pass some audits but not all audits. Ideally you want to pass all the audits. From a design perspective, you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit of your color choice sometimes so that more people can use your software. So let's talk about people who can still see but just need like bigger font to be able to read it. So for example, whenever I go over to my grandparents, their Internet Explorer 8 is like zoomed in 300%. I know it's already bad, but that like they can't read, so they have to zoom in the text. And an issue that can happen here, one column of text and another column of text, and as you raise the font of both, they can kind of become intermingled. There's also another thing that you should consider with images. Ideally, this is just bad practice anyways, for a number of reasons. Don't put text on an image because it affects your SEO, and Google can't pick up text on an image, and so your SEO gets pinged for that. But also accessibility issues, right? So if people are trying to resize it and there's this tiny little text on an image and you can't read it no matter what you do to resize the text, that's terrible. So don't do that. You need to take it off all of the images. The most common thing that happens here when you resize text on a page is that you get this weird horizontal scroll bar that you click and you can scroll left and right, but clicking a scroll bar and then reading a line of code all the way, a line of whatever from like left to right, just open your IDEs when you have a really long line of code and you have to scroll to the right to the very end to figure out what you're looking for. Like imagine trying to read that except like it's a full web page. It's terrible. Ideally, if you're gonna add a scroll to make your text bigger, you wanna add a vertical scroll bar so you can just read from top to bottom like people are used to reading. Next up, we have interaction. You need to be able to tab forward and backwards through a page. So you start at the top left of a page, and as you click tab, it navigates to each section of the page all the way to the buttons. Shift tab usually moves you back up There's some common issues with tabbing through a page. If you open a modal, the tab can get locked behind the modals. You might accidentally click a button that opens that, and now you can't tab to it because it's like separated on another layer on a different page, so to speak. Another thing here is that you need to be able to access drop downs, labels, and any errors on the page. Labels need to be labeled properly, so every form control needs a label, a for, and an ID. Those help screen readers. Visually, labels usually go to the left of an input box, give a description over here, and then the input box over here. And then for radios and checkboxes, you usually have the radio button here or a checkbox, the item on the right. Now, there are some more general issues that we could take a look at, such as moving information, flashing things on the screen, or just things that are blinking. There's a lot of problems there. I'm sure you guys could, obviously we think of like epilepsy. You should also understand that if you have like a marquee, I don't know if you guys remember the HTML tag marquee, but it's like when information goes from like left to right, like a banner. Some people have trouble reading things that are moving, and they process information more slowly. So the content might disappear before they're done reading and processing that information. Some people just have difficulty tracking moving objects in general. Now, on the flip side of that, there can be some distractions from moving content. So if someone's trying to read something and they're trying to focus and there's something moving or an ad that's flashing in the top right corner. Now, additionally, and obviously there are problems with blinking content, flashing things on the screen because people are photosensitive and we all think of epilepsy. There are a few ways to kind of put some checks in place for this. If you have information that's blinking, scrolling, flashing automatically that lasts more than 5 seconds, there needs to be some sort of enable, disable toggle there. If there's any information that gets auto updated on a page, so you're watching like a live graph of like a stock or something, there needs to be a control for the user to pause the auto update, or just a control for them to slow down or increase the frequency of the auto updating. For multimedia controls, if you're on a page that has a podcast on it and you click play and the person can't hear the podcast playing, you should have some subtitles and you should have some text for that. Finally, there's this thing called a basic structure check. Web pages are often designed with multiple columns and sections, colors, and other visual aspects to help organize information on the page. Visually, you can see the flow of information, but what about those people that can't? So ideally, you need to add a way to make the information on a page more linear, because a person with a screen reader, it's not going to make sense. The information's not going to be processed in any sensible way by the person using the screen reader. So you need to make it more linear, kind of like a hamburger type of web page. You can do this with just like a little simple toggle, but for those people who wouldn't visually know otherwise where to look on the page, this helps them out. All right, guys, so I put a lot of information into this video. It might take you a minute to get caught up. I'm going to put all the links where I got all this accessibility information. I'll put it down in a comment. I'm going to pin that there. Again, this is one of those topics that you can take to them. It doesn't matter if it comes up in the interview, so you can really catch them off guard and really set yourself apart when you come in. You're like, hey, well, have you considered adding accessibility? And if they say no, it's your job to tell them that you could bring them potential dollars and open up the market to people who can't use their software. If they say yes, congratulations, you're now qualified for another thing that maybe wasn't listed on the job application. So this video was kind of like an overview of what to look for and how to fix really common issues with accessibility. It wasn't like a deep dive into the HTML or anything like that. I'm going to be doing that, but I'm going to be doing that on my website, grindreel.academy, so you can go check that out. It'll be like how to take this page, which is not accessible like at all, and then we'll convert it to an accessible page. And this is good stuff you can put on a resume. Just talking about this is really great, that you've considered it and that you're willing to look more into it, even if you don't do like the deep dive into it. Again, guys, if this video has been helpful, please hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. Be sure to check out the Discord. That's where I'm always at, or you can just email me. We've got a lot of good people in there. We're almost at 8,000 people now, so that's gonna be awesome when we get to 10,000. Let me know what you think of this editing style. I put a lot of time into these little pop-ups and to the B-roll and to just setting things up differently. I hope you enjoyed it, because I enjoyed making it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.